Hello, and
Hello.
welcome to the new episode of Ace Alliance Insights, where together with my amazing guests, we discuss all things iGaming. And my name is Magda. I'll be your host today. For those of you who are new here, Ace Alliance is all about driving insightful conversations within the iGaming industry. Now, you may have noticed, but I have a bit different background today. And quick disclaimer, if I start breaking, the internet is not the best here. It includes a scene of Dubai, just without all the sunny weather. So I'm going to use this opportunity and mention that Ref Panda is actually exhibiting at Sigma Eurasia. And we've also become an official media partners with Affiliate World conferences. So if you're joining any of these conferences, make sure to say hi to the Ref Panda team. Today, I'm joined by Sasha Boerma. She's the Commercial Director Africa at Split the Pot. It's really worth mentioning that Sasha has just started this new exciting challenge, and she plays a crucial role in driving Split the Pot's growth and expansion across Africa. Her focus is on nurturing existing partnerships and forging new ones. Sasha, congratulations on the new role, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's definitely an interesting time to be chatting to you. I think we'll be talking about how the crossover happened and why. So there's a lot to be shared.
Absolutely. And it's really great to have you here. I'm so excited to chat with you again after our meeting at ICE Barcelona last week. We met just briefly because of
We
how
did.
busy it was, but it was a very lovely encounter. So today we're going to discuss the state of iGaming in Africa, something that Sasha knows perfectly well. So Africa is often described as the next big frontier for iGaming, and for very good reason. The continent's unique blend of demographics, rapid technological adoption, diverse cultures, it creates an environment that is really filled with opportunities and challenges for the iGaming industry. So if anyone from the audience has questions for Sasha, feel free to write them down in the comment section. And if time allows, we'll answer them live. Sasha, I'm sure most of our viewers already know you, either from iGaming events or through your previous roles. But for those who just met you at our show today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So obviously, I am from sunny South Africa, all the way in Cape Town. So I'm technically African. I was born and bred in Cape Town, but I have Dutch heritage, hence the blonde hair and blue eyes. So I was actually reflecting when I was looking at the questions earlier. I started in iGaming almost 5 years ago, which I can't believe how quickly that happened. It's literally flown. But I kind of landed in it by accident. I've always worked in digital marketing and advertising for over 2 decades. And a couple of years ago, one of my first bosses I ever worked for was looking for a project manager to build affiliate sites. So I knew absolutely nothing, but he was quite certain that I'd pick it up quite easily. And through that, I was asked to start a casino. And again, I knew absolutely nothing. I'd never played an online casino, and I thought they were insane to offer me this opportunity. But they knew my background and they were pretty confident I'd be able to do it. So with that, I started an online casino, and I wore all the hats at the beginning, from affiliate manager to VIP to CRM. And it was the first job where all my random things I'd learned through the years all sort of came together into one perfect job. And I absolutely loved it. I think I slept 2 hours a night because I was so addicted to watching the numbers and seeing how all your efforts and learnings just grew into amazing things. And that's sort of how it all started. And through my journey, obviously I live in Cape Town, South Africa. We launched a South African GEO. And through that, and obviously having contacts here and learning about how incredibly different the market is, it's something I've become extremely passionate about. I met Christian from Split the Pot. He's been in gaming for over 20 years and quite specialized in it. We met at Sigma, at Big Africa last year. And he was educating me about how incredibly difficult and diverse this market is, which I then obviously took to our own team who was launching in South Africa. And also started then with my postgrad in marketing in casinos in South Africa. So in my free time, I'm busy digging through research and literature to learn even more. So it's quite a perfect mix of everything I've done, obviously understanding the bigger picture, and then obviously honing into the African market and how different it is.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love that you have so much diverse experience within the industry. So now, regarding your new challenge, I'm so curious. Could you share what Split the Pot does and what it makes it different from similar companies in the iGaming space?
Yeah, so Split the Pot, their co-founders have been in the gaming sector for almost 20 years, if not up 20 years plus minus. And they saw the African market, as you said, as quite unique and quite diverse. And they saw the need for localization of content and looking at the actual players and how incredibly different they are. So they create the first thing, obviously, is low data usage games. So with the bandwidth and with mobiles being quite old and quite low, you need games that are extremely light and quite agile. And then obviously looking at the player base, they're not into traditional casino games. They are into, as we know, similar to Brazil, your crash games and your kind of locally created games, which they really tapped into. So the first being their low data, their simplicity of their games, and the second of creating games that speak to the African market and the cultures. So Taxi Crash was one of their biggest games, which has got the streets and the background of Johannesburg, which they created, with African taxis rushing down the street, which obviously speaks to South Africans. We understand this. We understand it. It's culturally, it sits with us very well. And it's through that they started continuing this thought process, and it's done very well.
I love that you said about this game and the background being Johannesburg. It's pretty cool. And I'm so curious, you personally, what attracted you to the iGaming industry? Was there like a defining moment or a project during those early years, 5 years ago, that confirmed that iGaming was the right path for you?
I think for me I think we've all done that where we've I went a lot to client side where I worked for Unilever and rolled out data projects in Africa, to working for advertising agency, which was getting big corporates to adopt digital marketing plans. And through that, a lot of it seems quite random. You're like, why am I doing this? It's such a waste of time. And when I started working in iGaming, it all sort of fitted together perfectly. And it was amazing to actually be able to see the results of the efforts you were putting in. It wasn't some sort of random project that you don't really see the big picture. And I love that how everything works together. So affiliation has to work together with your promo team. You can't work in isolation. Although I'm saying that a lot of operators still do work in isolation. But if you want to work the most effectively, bring it all together, really creates amazing results. And that was kind of where I got really addicted to it. I was like, this is amazing. And also agility of iGaming. Things are changing constantly and you have to be up to speed. You have to be learning. You have to be trying and testing new things. And if you don't, you're going to be left behind. And that competitive nature and that need for industry knowledge and growth, I just absolutely adore and love.
Yeah, I love what you just said, about the iGaming industry. There's always something happening. And when I came into iGaming, I had a very similar experience like you did. Like, I love my previous jobs, don't get me wrong, but they were kind of becoming more repetitive, whatever industry I was in. It was a lot of very similar things that I was doing, which I was excelling at. And in iGaming, I saw, wow, I have to, keep going. I have to keep improving myself to thrive in this industry. And this is a really challenging, but such a cool thing in iGaming. And it's really so interesting to hear what attracts people into this industry. So I'd now love to turn to our today's topic, as I have so many questions and we have so little time. So Africa is gaining very significant attention as a growth market for iGaming. But one common misconception is viewing it as a single market. So in reality, it is a collection of incredibly diverse regions, each with unique opportunities and challenges. So could you explain why understanding Africa's diversity is so crucial for success in the iGaming space?
Yeah, I think if we go back to basics, I think most of us with some of the licenses as operators would just launch a new GO, and it was sort of a kind of spray and pray approach. Like, we will open up to a new GO, we'll use Google Translate or ChatGPT and the best, get it proofreader to double check the translations, and off we go. And that was kind of what the approach we used a couple of years ago. And so now trying with the African market, it is really, really different, and that's not going to work. I've even seen some operators in Europe launching in South Africa with a €20 minimum deposit, which is huge. I mean, that's a good chunk of a weekly wage for an average South African. And also looking at your payment providers, their minimum deposits or their minimum fees are way ahead of what any normal local African can afford. But saying that, it just also creates some challenges. We've spoken to a couple of providers where they say the African, we're looking at quantity because it's such a massive market, but their spend is very low, but it will be consistent. Whereas obviously in the European market, it's very different. Your pot of players is much smaller, but the value is higher. So there are a lot of operators who just aren't interested because they're like, oh, it's too much work. We can't be bothered, even game providers. So it's also a different way of looking at things and seeing how things are different. And again, you mentioned the mobile data is completely different. You're looking at working on Android 4 phones. I mean, a South African has on average 4 to 5 phones anywhere they go at any moment. So they don't have one iPhone 14 Max Pro. They have really old phones. So, you really got to look at your market, look how different they are. But again, there's a lot of opportunity because the market is so big. I truly believe that for those who put the effort in and the research and look at what ways of creating, we'll talk about later, different marketing strategies, there's a lot to be gained.
Yeah, absolutely. And, trying to compare Africa's iGaming market to more established regions like Europe, to you, what stands out the most when you compare these two?
I think we touched on it briefly, which is saying that it's so incredibly different, just looking at even just the minimum deposits. And if you look at, for example, Nigeria is very based on almost a US player, like high risk, high volatility, where South Africa is more on the European sort of player behavior. So, and then even looking at South Africa, so, okay, that's difference in player behavior, but then digging a bit deeper, in South Africa, we have 11 official languages. So again, and our income brackets are completely different. So we do have the VVVIP players, and there is a market for that as well. And you'll speak to them very differently than you would for your general like middle and low income players. So again, even within a South African market, because Africa's huge, your players are completely different. So it's just being able to understand that Africa's not all the same. And I often laugh. It's like someone had to ask me right now, go start a casino in South Africa. I'd be like, oh, can I have a couple of weeks, just do some research as to where I really want to sit? Because there are so many opportunities, but I can't just launch one casino. It's not going to work. You have to know who you're speaking to. So I think when people start to understand that, I think it really creates a lot of opportunity and gives you a bit more insight on where you want to go and a bit of a roadmap.
Yeah, there's some really great insights. And also one challenge that I've heard is actually the lack of research available on gambling trends in Africa compared to other regions like, Europe, America. How big of an issue is this? And what do you think can operators do to address that gap?
I think the research has kind of been learned through doing. I mean, we've all worked in European markets, so it's all pretty genuinely like shared around. I mean, we know what a Finnish player prefers cashback versus, a Norwegian player. So I think out of experience, we've all learned the tier one markets pretty well, and it's kind of something we just accept. But because Africa is so new, those learnings haven't been shared because they haven't been learned yet. And again, there's not any massive research companies going in and saying, oh, we've studied the African market. I mean, Next did an amazing piece for Sonia put together, which was really insightful. But there isn't enough of that going around where people or companies are sharing knowledge about different markets. So with that, again, how do you speak to a market that you don't really know about? And how do you do it successfully? I spoke to an affiliate last year who tried to launch in Africa and soon realized that they were failing miserably. And they actually developed teams within each African country to feed them the insights and the content and how and what they need to do. And they're now performing extremely well, but they did stop to realize, okay, we actually don't know what we're doing here. So how do we learn? How do we find out information? And with that, they're reaping the rewards. But again, it's been done very differently to our usual approach.
Yeah, it's very clear that, like a one-size-fits-all approach cannot work here. And it goes the same to any other country, to be honest.
Absolutely.
And Africa, the continent, is not different at all. So you need to do research in specific countries. Like you said, like even South Africa itself is so diverse. So, one research might not be enough.
I mean, I was interviewing CRA managers a couple of months ago. And one of my questions was, if I'm launching into a new market, how would you research it? And I mean, they're CRM, they're supposed to be learning about player behavior and creating segments for that behavior. And 98% of the respondents, and I did a lot of interviews, 98% of the response said, oh, we'll just go online and look and see what the other casinos are doing. So where's your learnings? Like, where's your unique, where you're going to be niche, how you're going to speak differently if you're just doing what everyone else is doing? And I think for me, that was the biggest, so with my team, when they came on board, I was like, right, guys, we're actually going to go through journals and research and literature and go through studies. And it can be absolutely not related to casinos, but there'll be some gold in there. And it took a bit of extra effort, but we found some amazing insights. And it wasn't just for the South African market, we did it for the New Zealand market as well. And I learned quite a lot of new things by doing that exercise. But again, the thought pattern of we're just going to see what the top performing casinos are doing is not going to differentiate you and make you stand out.
Yeah, I truly agree with that. And so when we talk about this, I would also like to touch base on localization. So at Ref Panda, we put so much emphasis on, not just translating to another language, but like understanding all the nuances, the cultural differences, the differences in vocabulary, anything. So what aspects do you think operators should focus on to truly localize their offerings?
Well, I mean, you've hit it on the nail there. Please don't use ChatGPT or Google Translate. It will get it wrong. I'm actually busy with translations at the moment, and I can see it myself. So please don't do that. If you do it, get someone local just to double check, or use you guys to have a look and double check that it's done correctly, because the first thing that's going to make you lose credibility. And I think that's pretty obvious. And it's such a small thing. And to be honest, it's not a huge investment to get someone to do your translations properly. And again, get to know your audience. It's who you're speaking to. Are you speaking to, for example, South Africa, our license has to be done underneath a sports book. Are you speaking to the top players who are betting and horse racing? Or are we playing to a 18, 19-year-old who doesn't want to do anything with casinos but really likes playing crash games, which is a totally different, diverse sector in South Africa, and their gaming habits are completely different. So which one are you speaking to? So again, it's just really getting to know who you're speaking to, and the best way is go sit in a shebeen in the townships. Please get a tour operator to go with you. Don't go on your own for safety reasons, but go and actually see. I think even if you look at, on the flights home from Barcelona, the amount of people that were playing games on their phones, and I was so curious to see who was playing what game. I even had a Minister of Finance sitting with me next to me on the plane, and she was also playing a crash game, and I was very interested to see what type of games she was playing. And then again, so who's playing what are your markets, what interests them, and you'll be quite surprised. I didn't see like the minister playing that game on her phone, as that wouldn't come top of mind. But then again, it educates me about how little obviously I know about who's playing what game. So don't assume things, is what I'm saying. Like, go dig a bit deeper and go see what's happening in the market, and don't sit far away on the other side of the world. Get to know who you're speaking to.
Yeah, I really love that insight. And at first you may not even realize that that how different it is speaking to a young person and to somebody having top positions. It's so important. Yeah, and at first maybe companies may be a little bit intimidated because there are so many things that you need to consider. And then maybe you say, we're just going to look at other casinos, how they're doing. Maybe this is the easy way out for them, but the easy way out is not really the best one.
Well, we was at a panel last year actually, and there was a woman who did some research on the youth market in townships, and she was sharing some really interesting insights. And some of them were, for example, that in South Africa, they are not interested in 100 free spins. So all your banners with whatever welcome offer, they're absolutely not interested. They want to know that a real life person won 2 million rand. So they want to see a picture of that person with their winnings, and that's the banner they want to see. So, it's tiny little things like that as well. The youth market doesn't want to be associated with casinos. They see it, it's quite off-putting. So, but they're very much into their social game. So that's why crash games do so incredibly well. So again, if you've got a traditional casino built that's just punting and showing slots, is that the right message? And it's something to think about. Or do you want to build a casino that's more about crash games with maybe a few slot games? So it's kind of thinking about things a little bit differently. But again, it's who you're speaking to and what are you trying to tell them? Again, or just some insights on the youth market. They bet throughout the day. So they're doing 3,000 bets. It's not a Friday night or a Sunday when they're bored. They play continuously. So, but it's little bets again, seeing that mass market approach. So, it's just, again, who you're speaking to and how different is their player behavior.
I want to ask your expert tips on improving player experience in Africa. So, for instance, most players connect to the internet through mobile devices, which calls for really responsive design for operator websites. Or maybe due to diverse cultures, website colors or CTAs, they should be localized. So can you tell us more about player experience recommendations for this region?
Yeah, so we were saying earlier just about the youth players and how they don't want to be associated with casino games, which is why I'm going to say this, I think, the third time, doing games that are different. And again, if you look at South Africa with our regulations, it's complicated. I don't know if we have time to go into that, but the casino games are kind of part of a sports book game suite is probably the best way to explain it. So, from a sports book to a casino game is quite a big transition. So those kind of gamification games is also nice crossover. So, allowing free play, low data, no data games to kind of cross over those players and also kind of help with player education to get them into it and get them to learn and understand games without them having to go off the bat, put money in and lose money. So allow them to kind of educate themselves and give them player education through free plays. No data or low data games is also quite essential. And the big thing that everyone speaks about, and obviously we haven't spoken about yet, is just your payment provider options. On the black market, it's really difficult to get payment options, for example, in South Africa. So, just making sure you've got good payment provider options. And I had a little bit of a giggle because we were asked to speak about it on a panel at IGB about payment providers. And I actually sent through, but they didn't share it, a picture of what a traditional payment provider in Africa looks like. It's literally an old table with a rusty umbrella and literally a credit card machine. And so most of the workers in South Africa are wage workers. So they get paid on a Friday and they'll go to their local, area that they live in the corner of the dusty road. They'll take their cash and they'll give it to this vendor and they'll get print out a slip with a bonus code or a voucher. And that's your payment provider. It's not the payment provider that we all think about in tier one. So, you're talking to your market quite differently and, your payment provider and how to get hold of them is quite different. You're not sending them an email. You have to physically go speak to them or you physically have to go recruit payment providers in these townships. So, also just thinking about that. Are you looking at prepaid voucher options? Are you looking at maybe, starting something like that in Africa, which is a big, there's a big gap in the market for it because there isn't much of it. So just looking at answering those questions. I mean, you can have the best casino in the world, but if people can't deposit or play on your casino, there's not much hope for it. So again, just who you're speaking to and how you're going to reach them.
Yeah, I 100% did not expect this kind of payment provider insight. This is very cool. And, something that at first we don't even consider.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, actually. When I first saw it, I was like, oh my goodness. But in reality, that's who you're speaking to. And I mean, we're all heading to a conference in Lagos the end of next month. And part of my trip, which I'm terrified of traveling around Nigeria, is to actually go to the market, the actual physical market, and go see and speak to the payment providers and the operators there to actually understand the market. Because you might as well use your time effectively. But those are the insights and learnings. Again, like when we were launching in South Africa, these things weren't being discussed at all. It was like, oh, we just need to find a payment provider who can, we never looked at these options. We never thought about these options. It wasn't even part of the conversation. So the more we get exposed to these sort of things, I think the better products will be created and the better we'll serve the market.
Yeah. And I keep my fingers crossed for the Nigeria trip. I think it's going to be exciting, really.
Yeah. There are a few of us are going to stick close together.
Yeah. So thank you so much for those insights. And Now we've come to the question that all operators must be wondering about. So marketing in Africa also comes with its own set of challenges, from, like I said, cultural nuances to different advertising channels. What advice would you give operators on effective strategies for player acquisition in this region?
Well, it depends which region you're speaking to. I mean, as I've alluded to earlier, South Africa's got a really difficult regulation strategy with regards to even advertising the word online casino. So it depends if you're speaking to the regulated casinos or unregulated casinos. There are positives and negatives for each side. But for example, you're not allowed to advertise online casino in South Africa for the regulated market. But obviously the payment provider options are much bigger if you decide to target that. But then on the black market, obviously no one's going to stop you, but then again, you're going to struggle with payment providers. So it depends where you want to play. And then if you look at other regions such as Nigeria and Ghana, they're really struggling with Google, because Google has basically pulled out of the payment advertising options for them. And the governments are getting involved trying to change that. But again, Google's just very nervous of those markets. So again, it creates some different struggles. But again, just remembering who you're speaking to. Nigeria, again, if you look at the market, they're not a big online market. Yes, they'll play online games, but they're not big with purchasing. So again, we were talking about crypto and things. That's too advanced for them. You know, they very much about their influencers, their rappers, their musicians, traditional roadshows. I mean, I had a laugh at one of the big casinos, how their marketing campaign, the majority of their budget literally goes by sticking a rapper on the back of a truck, driving them through a township or rural area, and literally they got promoters handing out flyers showing them how to play the game. It's good one-to-one marketing, and just remembering that those markets aren't as advanced as, you know, the European tier one. So it's really that face-to-face, experiential, old school marketing that we used to back in the day that's definitely still got its place in the African market.
Yeah, I think a lot of marketing went to digital. In Europe, in America, you know, in Asia even. But we still need to remember about the traditional marketing, the way that the one that we used to know as children. So, like you say.
And also just remember, I mean, Africa didn't have that massive COVID mind shift where we shifted basically to doing everything online. I mean, we're doing this online, we do our shopping online, we do our meetings online. Remote working is huge, but that's because we work in industries that we can. Africa is still very much, you know, worker based, going to a factory, going to a house, going to, you know, they're moving around and they're still going to shops, they're going to shop at markets, they're not doing their shopping. COVID didn't pivot them like it pivoted, you know, the tier one markets. So they're still very much pre-COVID days where everything's physical. And that's quite something to remember.
Yeah, that is such a good point. You know, being online for us has just become a second nature, basically. And
we take it for granted.
Yeah, 100%. So I wanted to touch base a little bit about on payment solutions, because they are really, like you were saying, another critical part of the player experience. With innovations like, you know, mobile money and cryptocurrencies, how can operators further streamline transactions for African players?
I think the first thing is obviously just looking at your minimum. I mean, €5, which is often your minimum. I mean, that's equivalent to 100 South African rand, which is half of someone's daily wage. So that is a lot of money to ask as a minimum fee. So just keeping that in mind, and when you're integrating payment providers, just remembering how much that is worth for someone here in South Africa. And again, just looking at different options. I mean, there's, as I was saying, prepaid vouchers, as I was saying earlier with the kiosk. I mean, basically they're going to a gentleman with like a sort of a credit card sort of payment machine, and they'll hand over their cash, and that little machine will print out a voucher, which they'll then go and use on an online casino or a lottery or whatever sort of payment they want to do. And just checking that their payment providers offer that. I mean, I can honestly tell you, when we were launching for South Africa, I didn't even know that that was something I should be asking or looking for, who provides that and how do we market that? And then again, how do we educate those payment providers to promote our games? Because again, you know, how is that word of mouth going to happen? How are they going to know to go play your casino versus someone else? Because again, they're not looking at an online banner. They're probably going to hear it from a friend or from an influencer on TikTok. TikTok again is huge. Instagram is huge. Social media is still really, really big. It's probably bigger than your good old Google. And they're very influenced by friends and very influenced by money and lifestyle and the bigger, better name brands, wearing a Nike clothing. They're still very much looking for status. So as a marketing channel, that's also very big to kind of advertise with that sort of slant. As we were saying earlier, they want to see how much money they're winning. And why do they want to know they're winning? Because they want that status of being rich. And they want to know it's possible for them. So it's a very different way of thinking in marketing.
Yeah, that's a great insight about social media, especially since social media have become sort of a search engine. For many people, when they want to ask something, they ask YouTube, they ask TikTok, not even Google.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was with a very Gen Z doing Barcelona the day before we're touring Barcelona. And the amount of times that, I won't mention her name, but the amount of times she referenced, oh, I found this app on TikTok. I found this on TikTok. And I was like, oh my goodness, like how much time do you spend on TikTok and how do you find all of this information? Which is also quite different. I mean, I think, for example, for me, I use ChatGPT for everything. I wouldn't go to TikTok for it. But then again, I'm not the market. I'm older. So again, just showing how differently the markets and segments behave and where they're looking for information. Again, as I was saying, social media for the youth is huge. That's where they spend all their time. I can tell you right now, they're not on ChatGPT. And it was really a good reminder about that.
Yeah, and for TikTok, I can tell you, I used to spend some time on TikTok as well, and I adapted that thing. And I read it somewhere, which meant I saw it on TikTok.
I know.
It's a different way of saying, oh, I know something.
But I mean, but again, what's quite scary is, I mean, TikTok, we're all looking for authentic and credible communication. But again, I mean, TikTok is not credible and authentic. So it still surprises me that people are so addicted to following a lifestyle that they would rather follow like that lifestyle TikTok than actual factual, authentic content on like, an accredited site, which I find quite interesting. It shows you that need for acceptance and that lifestyle that people are still searching for, which is different, but that's what makes the world go round. And that's what kind of heartens again about how you really have to understand people and study people's thinking and who you're speaking to, because what we assume isn't always correct and how we would think when you speak to people isn't always correct. And as you're saying, that's the great thing about iGaming. Things are always changing. You can't assume. And you got to keep learning and adapting. And as obviously these generations get older by each year, I mean, like I said, I can't believe I've been doing this almost 5 years already. So what I thought 5 years ago is completely different to what I think now. And also our players have matured. They've gotten older. So are we changing the way that we're talking to them in those 5 years? And they're looking for information in different ways than they did 5 years ago. And these are all questions which I find quite interesting. I mean, Unilever, when I worked there, this is what Unilever built the empire on, was learning about their consumers. And as a gap that I feel is quite prevalent in iGaming. I mean, we're so technically advanced and we definitely one of the leading industries with regards to tech and digital platforms. But with regards to learning about consumers, that's not where our budgets are going. And if you look, as I said, like Unilever, they've streets ahead, and that how they speak and where they speak and learning about who they're speaking to and cross-selling, and that's how that giant and those monsters have made their fortunes. But it's the one gap in iGaming that I definitely think still needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I fully agree. And thank you for sharing these thoughts, Sasha. I would like to change the topic a little and turn to your own experience in iGaming. I wanted to talk about building strong affiliate relationships because of you have such vast experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on affiliate marketing in iGaming. Are there enough affiliate companies in Africa currently? How do you see that sector evolving over the next few years?
So I've spoken on a couple of panels about iGaming, and there definitely aren't enough affiliates. There's definitely a big gap in South Africa and Africa in general. But, the questions are always the same. How do we speak to the market? How do we enter? And the things that frighten them, obviously the the language barrier is huge, and if you can do something in English, it's much more comfortable than a language you don't understand at all. And the other issue is, your operators in South Africa or Africa, your CPA and your acquisition rates are going to be much, much lower. So, but it's a long-term game. It's building that relationship over long term. So it's not a quick win. It's not like you're going to get a 400 CPA plus revenue share. You're going to get a tiny one, and you're going to have to wait it out. But obviously the value is there. And a lot of affiliates are like, it's a lot of effort. And so like, I'm not really keen. I'm rather going to focus on another market that's a little bit more comfortable, that I understand a bit better. So there is definitely a massive need for affiliates. I know I've spoken to quite a few marketing directors even this week in South Africa, where they're desperate for acquisition. But again, when I speak to affiliates, they don't really want to put the investment or the know-how. And the ones that do are doing exceptionally well. They're doing really, really well. And they are seeing the long-term gains in it. So it's about being brave, thinking differently, just, being open to trying new things. And the reward is definitely there.
Yeah, that is true. Operators really need to look for more creative ways to attract affiliate companies, because like you say, there is potential, but it's a longer perspective.
Yeah, so we're talking about relationships as well. It's also just creating, there's also affiliates aren't talking to operators, and operators aren't talking to affiliates. I often say one of my childhood friends is in one of the marketing teams of one of the big companies. And I was like, well, why don't you work in closer partnership? Like, if there's a really good affiliate company, help them, tell them what they need to build, tell them like what you need, and build an actual partnership with them, because they've got the recipe on how the actual affiliate site needs to perform. You just need to help them create the content. So, build a proper partnership. And I think that's where the operators need to just open up a little bit more in order to, and, just build those relationships, especially with strong affiliates. And it's mutually beneficial. But it's that lack of information share at the moment that I think that's where everyone's getting a bit stuck. And it's something that can be fixed quite easily.
Yeah, I think the stuff that we talked about, doing enough research and putting a lot of effort into that research can really help operators make decisions about how to attract affiliates. So because we are slowly running out of time, I wanted to switch the topic again and ask you, which African countries do you see as the most promising for iGaming growth in 2025?
So, as we all know, with 48 million in South Africa, yes, we're at the bottom of the world, but it's the population is huge, and obviously
where you're looking from.
Yeah, and it's quite, the internet's quite stable, and so the infrastructure is really good here. So, and also as I said earlier, our players behave very similar to European players, so it's not that much of a stretch to understand the market. And obviously, the English is still quite prevalent here, so it's definitely a good space. Nigeria is obviously massive. There's lots of money to be found there, and again, a big population. Kenya has just improved, I think a year or two ago, their internet infrastructure, so it's somewhere that everyone's looking as well. Ghana is also very interesting at the moment. The government getting involved with Google to try and get them to free up the advertising online casinos, and they're doing quite a lot of investment, and so is Mozambique. Mozambique also has quite a lot of Asian money in the market, which I think people don't realize. And that's actually true for a lot of African countries. There's a lot of Asians that are being brought in, and they are big bettors. So, that you also need to look at talking to those markets within those countries.
Yeah. So we have South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Mozambique. Yeah. And now, looking ahead, when it comes to technology and innovation shaping the future of iGaming globally, and Africa is not an exception. So where do you see the iGaming industry in Africa heading over the next few years? Are there like any trends or technologies that really excite you?
So, it's at the top of my head. Obviously, localization of content. We had quite a few meetings with the big providers, and that's definitely something that's being focused on. Again, with player education, trying to cross-sell, and kind of trying to localize content. That's a big talking point with a lot of the operators, and the need for that. And then also trying to just, make with the payment providers space being so difficult, is just trying to invest and find new ways of doing that. I've actually seen some really good technology in Barcelona that makes games quite accessible and payments quite accessible by basically prepaid cards, chip cards on game platforms, which can even be strapped to the back of a taxi chair in a taxi rank. So there's some really nice technology that's coming out that's simplifying and making access to games a lot easier. So there's some interesting tech coming. So I think some fun things are going to start happening quite soon.
Yeah. Sasha, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Sure.
And before we wrap up, is there one key piece of advice or a takeaway that you'd like to leave with our audience?
I think my one piece is don't be scared because it's new and different. There is a lot. If you like to learn and you like a challenge, it's definitely a very fun space to play, and can be extremely rewarding. And again, don't be scared because of the low value, high volume game, which is very different. Don't walk away from it. There's a lot to be found. And I find that quite sad actually when people are like, oh, it's too much effort. And I think with regulations happening the way it is happening in Europe, and the pot and the size of it getting smaller and more difficult, I think people are silly to shy away from the challenge. I think there's a lot to be earned and learned on this side of the world.
Yeah, 100%. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. And so for those who want to learn more about Split the Pot and connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Just drop me a line on LinkedIn. I'm always to be found there. Or otherwise grab me at a conference. I'm always around.
That is 100% true. You literally were the first person that I met that I knew when I entered the venue in Barcelona.
And you hadn't even gone into the conference yet. We were still at check-in.
Exactly. Yeah,
exactly.
That's true. Sasha, thank you so much. Thank you again. I'm sure our viewers and listeners really took plenty of notes today. And again, thank you for the patience with my wonky internet. It likes to play tricks. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. And I'll see you at the next episode of Ace Alliance Insights, where I'll be chatting with Liana Klein from Afiverse. So see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.